namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. The war in West Asia remains our top focus. Attacks are on in Lebanon as the world waits to see what Israel's response to Iran will look like. US President Joe Biden says, don't hit the nuclear facilities. But will Netanyahu listen to him? Meanwhile, Tehran is gearing up its proxies, what they call the axis of resistance, and trying to rally the Muslim world to support it. Where do the Gulf states stand? Whose side will they pick? We're also bringing you two exclusive interviews tonight with the ambassadors of Iran and Israel in India. We asked them a bunch of common questions and got diametrically opposite responses, which shouldn't be surprising, I suppose. But it makes for a gripping contrast. Plus, we'll bring you the military map of West Asia. Which country has which assets in which part of the region? We will show you tonight. And a look at the lives of the common people. Are they tense? Are they fleeing? Are they stocking up on rations? Or are they going about their business? We are looking at Israel, Iran, Iraq and Lebanon. Also a report on what Zakir Naik is doing in Pakistan, the same man who is wanted in India. And how Britain is finally returning an island in the Indian Ocean to Mauritius. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Iran summons the German and Austrian envoys over criticism of its attack on Israel. This was in response to Germany and Austria summoning their Iranian envoys. Tehran condemns what it calls the continued bias of the European nations. Iran says Tuesday's attack was a necessary response to Israel's aggressive actions. NATO's new Secretary General visits Kiev, says his priority is to ensure that Ukraine prevails against Russia. But President Zelensky criticizes the West, slams delays in the supply of long-range weapons. Kiev is also pressuring its allies to shoot down Russian missiles and drones. Libya's Eastern administration lifts the blockade on oil production and export. It was imposed in August amid a rift over the central bank. Just days ago, the oil-rich country appointed a new central bank governor. The appointment was made under a UN-backed deal between Libya's two rival administrations. Taiwan shuts down for the second day as Typhoon Krathon makes landfall. The heavy rain and fierce winds cause flooding and mudslides. At least 2 people have been killed and around 10,000 evacuated. Schools, offices and businesses remain shut. And Singapore's former minister S. Iswaran jailed in a rare graft trial. He was sentenced to 12 months in prison. Last week, he was convicted of obstruction of justice and accepting illegal gifts. This is Singapore's first political graft trial in nearly half a century. Israel could attack Iran at any moment now. Global tensions are mounting, oil prices have shot up and the stock markets are down. In India, both the Sensex and the Nifty closed the day's trade in red. The American markets are also down. The Israeli war cabinet has met and preparations are believed to be in progress. Israel says it is gearing up for a quote-unquote significant strike. In the meantime, the ground offensive in Lebanon is intensifying. Take a look at this first. Those pictures are from Beirut. Israel has intensified its airstrikes in Lebanon. Last night, it struck central Beirut. The target was a multi-story block in Bashura, barely a few meters away from Lebanon's parliament, the Prime Minister's office and the United Nations headquarters in the country. That's where Israel struck, close to this area. This kind of attack is unprecedented. Israel is conducting airstrikes deep inside the Lebanese capital. Through the day today, Israel has been pounding central Beirut. There are reports of several large blasts. At least 9 people have died in these strikes.
On the borders, members of Hezbollah killed Israeli soldiers. But Israel comes and kills people here. Whenever there is a building, they damage it. This is what they are able to do.
Earlier, Israel had said that its operations are, and I'm quoting, limited, localized and targeted. But with today's strikes, Israel has expanded the scope of the battlefield. Prime Minister Netanyahu says Israel is in the middle of a difficult war.
We are at the height of a difficult war against Iran's axis of evil, which wants to destroy us. This will not happen because we will stand together, and with God's help, we will win together. We will get the hostages back from the south, and we will get our citizens back to the north, and we will guarantee the victory of Israel.
Fighting is also intensifying in southern Lebanon. Israeli troops are engaging Hezbollah fighters there. The IDF, the Israeli Defense Force, has suffered casualties. We told you about this yesterday. 8 Israeli soldiers have died in the Lebanon operation so far. Hezbollah says it repelled Israeli forces. It also destroyed 3 Israeli tanks. Meanwhile, more missiles continue to fly towards Israel. Both the Hezbollah and the Houthis in Yemen are firing them. Israel remains undeterred by these attacks. In fact, the IDF is doubling down. It is deploying more troops for this offensive. It is also asking more locals in Lebanon to leave. Israel has issued more evacuation notices today. So far, 76 villages have received such orders. All of them are in southern Lebanon. Israel has released a video showing its troops in action. So Israel has no plans to back down in Lebanon. It is also assessing the damage from the Iranian attack 2 days ago. Fresh satellite images have emerged. Take a look at what they show. This is an Israeli air base. It houses their most advanced aircraft. An Israeli air base with the aircraft like the American-made F-35s. Iran targeted this air base in Tuesday's strike, and it did inflict some damage. Now look carefully. A roof near the main runway is damaged. There are large pieces of debris around the building. This confirms what many experts have been saying, that Iran did manage to breach Israeli air defenses.
Iran launched approximately 200 missiles at the state of Israel yesterday. Iran attacked civilian areas and endangered the lives of many citizens. Thanks to proper civilian behavior and high-quality defenses, the damage was relatively minor. We will respond. We know how to locate important targets. We know how to strike with precision and power.
That's why Israel wants to hit back hard. Yesterday, they attacked Syria again with an airstrike in Damascus. And what was the target? Reports say the Israelis killed Hassan Jafar al-Qasir. Hassan Jafar al-Qasir, the son-in-law of Hassan Nasrallah, the Hezbollah chief who was killed by Israel last week. Now they've killed his son-in-law. There is no official confirmation on this yet, neither from Lebanon nor the Hezbollah, but it's being widely reported. And if this story checks out, it would mean that Israel has dealt another blow to the Hezbollah. Meanwhile, Iran is making some diplomatic moves. The Iranian president was in Qatar today. That's Masoud Pezeshkian. He's trying to rally diplomatic support after Tuesday's attack. From Doha, he issued a fresh warning to Israel.
We are not in pursuit of war with Israel. They promised us peace. But Israel has terrorized our guests in Tehran during our presidential inauguration. We want to establish peace. If you disagree, peace will not be established.
So Iran is putting up a brave face. But behind the scenes, the regime is also cracking down. Reports say several arrests have been made. The Iranian leadership fears that Israel has infiltrated their security establishment, including the powerful Revolutionary Guards. So a purge is now underway to clean up the upper ranks. Iran's supreme leader himself gave the orders. That's Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Apparently, he had also warned Hassan Nasrallah. Just days before Nasrallah's assassination, both leaders, Khamenei and Nasrallah, had spoken to each other, and Khamenei, in no uncertain terms, had asked Hassan Nasrallah to leave Lebanon. He told him that there are Israeli spies within the Hezbollah and that Israel was planning to kill him. But it appears that the warning came too late. The Hezbollah chief could not act on Khamenei's advice, and Israel managed to kill him. Reports say Khamenei is deeply worried now about the state of Iranian security establishment and the extent to which it has been compromised. Khamenei himself has been moved to a secret location. He's possibly planning Tehran's next moves there. If Israel attacks Iran, Tehran will need more retaliatory options, and West Asia will remain trapped in a cycle of violence.
So I caution the government of Israel not to be blinded by rage. It would be a mistake for Israel to occupy Gaza again.
We do not want to see a major operation happening in Rafah.
That's been the story so far. Biden draws a red line, Israel crosses it with no consequences. First, it was civilian casualties. Then it was the occupation of Gaza. Then attacking Rafah. Frankly, we have lost count of the red lines. There's a new one every 2 months. This time it's about Iran. Israel is planning to escalate after Tuesday's missile attack. Reports say they could hit Iran's nuclear sites, but Joe Biden is against it. He says the response should be proportional.
Would you support an attack on Iran's nuclear sites by Israel?
The answer is no. I think there's things. We'll be discussing with the Israelis what they're going to do, but all 7 of us agree that they have a right to respond, but they should respond proportionally.
Let me explain the thinking here. For Netanyahu, this is a career-defining chance to dismantle Iran's nuclear program. All his mistakes in the last 1 year would be forgiven. His legacy would be set for life. Just one problem, though. He can't do it alone. If Iran hits back, he needs an insurance plan. He needs someone to shield his country, and that is the United States of America. If Biden privately or publicly backs such an attack, Israel will go ahead. There are no second thoughts. But if he doesn't, Israel may have to rethink. At least that is Biden's assumption. The question is, will it work? We ask because it hasn't in the past. It hasn't worked in the past. In October last year, Biden asked Israel to protect Gazan civilians. More than 40,000 are dead now. He then told Israel to not occupy Gaza. Last we checked, Israel's military controls the entire Gaza Strip. Biden then asked Netanyahu to not invade Rafah. Today, Rafah is a ghost town. Only concrete and metal debris remains. And finally, he asked Netanyahu to not attack Lebanon, to take a ceasefire deal. And again, Israel ignored him. Right now, Israeli soldiers are battling the Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, meaning they have invaded. So looking at the past, one thing is quite clear. Israel is more than willing to ignore Joe Biden's warnings. But why is that? Most of Israel's weapons, after all, come from the US. Washington is their most important ally. So how can Netanyahu just keep ignoring him? Well, he can because of Biden's weakness. You see, a red line requires 2 conditions. A, there should be only one. Multiple red lines defeat the whole purpose of a red line. And B, you must enforce it. Biden did not meet either condition. He revealed his hand in March this year. The president was asked about Israel invading Rafah. Listen to his response.
It is a red line, but I'm never going to leave Israel. The defense of Israel is still critical, so there's no red line. I'm going to cut off all weapons so they don't have the Iron Dome to protect them.
So he made it pretty clear America will never abandon Israel. Secondly, he couldn't enforce his red lines. There are many ways to do it. You can stop military sales, you can stop shielding Israel at the United Nations Security Council, but Joe Biden did not do any of that. He stopped one military shipment in the month of May this year. That's it, one shipment. 50,000 tons of aid given, just one shipment withheld. Honestly, it is humiliating for Biden. He's supposed to be the most powerful person in the world, yet Netanyahu took him for a ride. Could this time be any different? Well, on paper, there is more at stake. Iran is more powerful than Hezbollah or Hamas. They could even strike American assets. More than 43,000 U.S. soldiers are deployed in West Asia. If the conflict widens, they could be targeted. Biden will want to avoid that in the middle of an escalation. The last thing he needs is an attack on U.S. soldiers. At the same time, he cannot look weak, especially with Donald Trump in the picture.
The world right now is spiraling out of control. I've been talking about World War III for a long time, and I don't want to make predictions because the predictions always come true. We have a non-existent president and a non-existent vice president who should be in charge, but nobody knows what's going on.
That's the challenge for Joe Biden. This is probably the most important red line he's drawn. But is he willing to enforce it? Netanyahu is reportedly planning to escalate within days. So we'll have the answer soon. Now let's talk about Israel's opponents. Israel is not fighting a single enemy. It's not even a two-front war. Israel is dealing with multiple opponents in multiple countries, all linked together by one player, Iran. Israel has the latest weapons, unmatched intelligence, and American support. Iran, on the other hand, has its proxies, the so-called axis of resistance, or as Israel likes to call it, the axis of evil.
I would like to send the condolences from the bottom of my heart to the families of our heroes who fell today in Lebanon. May their memory be blessed and they rest in peace. We are at the height of a difficult war against Iran's axis of evil, which wants to destroy us.
Yesterday, Netanyahu sent his condolences to the families of 8 Israeli soldiers who died in Lebanon. They were killed during the ground operation in Lebanon's south, in an on-ground battle against Hezbollah. On the other side, you had Hezbollah doing some chest thumping.
Today, our forces fought in the first heroic battle this morning in Al-Adessa and also in Maroun al-Ras, minutes before the start of this presser. What happened today is only the beginning of what awaits the occupation forces. The leadership of Hezbollah will follow the promise of the Sayed Nasrallah himself and will rebuild in a way that will be better and more beautiful than they were before.
Hassan Nasrallah is dead. But that does not mean that the Hezbollah is down and out. They still have thousands of fighters, tens of thousands of rockets, which they continue to fire into Israel. Yes, Israel has the upper hand, but invading Lebanon won't be easy, no matter the technological advantage. Ask the Americans how their occupation of Afghanistan went against the apparently backward and impoverished Taliban. It shows you how hard it is to occupy foreign territory with a hostile population. And while Israel marches north, it also has to watch the south for Iranian proxy number 2, the Houthi rebel group.
The Air Force of the Yemeni Armed Forces carried out a military operation targeting a vital target in the Jaffa area in occupied Palestine using a number of Jaffa-type drones. The operation successfully achieved its objectives, by the grace of God, with the drones reaching their targets without the enemy being able to intercept or shoot them down.
The Houthis were once considered bit-part players in the region. Their influence was limited to Yemen, where Iran had been fighting a proxy war with the Saudis. But then the October 7th attack took place, and the Houthis started attacking ships in the Red Sea. That is how they shot to international fame. And even now, they're sticking to this tried and tested strategy. They have warned of what they call a new phase of their campaign. They're actually sending emails to shipping companies, warning them to steer clear. The reason is obvious. They want to disrupt trade. It's not about sinking ships. The Houthis just want to cause problems for Israel any way they can. The Houthis are also firing missiles and drones at Israel. But this isn't as effective as the Red Sea attack. So barring the odd drone here or there, they leave the conventional fighting to the other proxies.
The Yemeni armed forces salute the heroic mujahideen on the fronts of Gaza and the West Bank, as well as the fronts of Lebanon and Iraq, and affirm their continuation in carrying out military operations against the Israeli enemy until the aggression is stopped and the siege on the Gaza Strip is lifted, as well as stopping the aggression on Lebanon.
Let's look at all these different fronts that he mentioned. You have two proxies in Gaza. It's not just Hamas. You also have the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, or PIJ. Now, these two groups operate independently, but sometimes they do come together, like we saw during the October 7th attack last year. That's one. Then there's the Hezbollah in Lebanon, the most powerful of Iran's proxies. Next door in Syria, you have the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, or PFLP. It was officially a political party like Hamas and Hezbollah, but it also has its own armed wing, the Abu Ali Mustafa Brigades. They are among a number of Iran-backed militias in Syria, which is why you see Israel bombing Damascus every so often. Then there is Iraq, where you have the Popular Mobilization Forces. This is a coalition of armed groups with various mandates and operations. But among them, you have anti-Israel factions, like the Kataib Hezbollah, which is another Iranian proxy. And rounding off the list are the Houthis in Yemen. So that's what Israel is dealing with. Iran-backed groups in Lebanon, Gaza, Yemen, Syria, and Iraq. They make up the axis of resistance or evil, depends on who you support. We've talked about the West, we've talked about Iran's proxies. These are groups that have picked a side. Their allegiance is pretty clear. But we can't say the same about the Gulf Arab states. If the war between Iran and Israel escalates, what will the Arab states do? Which side will they support? In April, their choice was pretty clear. Back then, when Iran struck Israel in the month of April, the Arab states shot down Iranian drones. They basically defended Israel. What about this time? No such indication so far. What's more, there are some interesting developments in the region. Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian is visiting Qatar. Guess who else is in the country? The Gulf foreign ministers. 6 of them form a bloc called the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council. You've got Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, and Qatar. 6. Their foreign ministers met in Doha. Together, they condemned Israel's aggression in Lebanon and Gaza. They also asked all stakeholders to de-escalate, to prioritize dialogue. After this meeting, the Saudi foreign minister met Iran's president. They exchanged, I'm sorry. The Saudi foreign minister and the president of Iran, they exchanged a handshake. They even held delegation-level talks. Pezeshkian called Saudi Arabia a brother nation. Now, his intentions are quite clear. Israel could strike any moment, yet he flew all the way to Doha and held these meetings. He's trying to rally the Muslim world. He wants to see if he can count on the Arab states. Well, can he? Let's look at the dynamic. Iran and the Arab world have traditionally been rivals. Iran is a Shia Muslim country. The Gulf Arab states are Sunni Muslims. So the rivalry was religious and political. But right now, relations are at a good place. China brokered a normalization deal between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and since then, ties have improved. Last year, Iran's president visited Saudi Arabia for talks. Even the new president, Pezeshkian, was congratulated by Riyadh. So the Arab states have no reason to rock this boat, to disrupt this reset. They mainly have two priorities. One is Palestine, the other is business. That's all that they care about. Most Arab people support Palestinian statehood. The war in Gaza has been traumatic for them. So the Gulf rulers cannot abandon the cause so easily. At least in public, they must put up a facade. Secondly, a lot of money is at stake. Iran sits on a very important trade route, the Strait of Hormuz. Nearly 30% of the world's oil passes through this route. In the past, Iran has threatened to shut it off, and if war breaks out, they may actually do it. Iran could disrupt the global oil supply. They could also strike Arab oil refineries. In fact, Iran has reportedly warned about this. They told the United States that if Iranian refineries are attacked, Arab ones would also burn. That's the biggest worry for the Gulf states. Disruptions to oil and trade. Would they like to see Iran weakened? Well, maybe. Would they like Iran's nuclear program destroyed? Definitely. But the fallout is too unpredictable, which is why Gulf states want a de-escalation. And what are they doing to achieve it? Not very much. The Gulf Arab states are close allies of the US, yet they haven't pushed Joe Biden on this issue. Look at their statement in Doha. This is what they've said. We urge the international community to fulfill its responsibilities to maintain security and stability in the region and to implement international legitimacy resolutions related to the area. They're asking the global community to step in. Well, they already have. Most countries have demanded a ceasefire, but Israel won't listen to them. The only country that has a chance is the United States of America if the Gulf states push Joe Biden. Maybe he will take a tougher stance. But for whatever reason, they haven't. The Gulf seems to be taking a wait and watch approach. Usually, it's a safe strategy, but in this case, it could easily backfire. So most Arab states seem to be neutral. Why do you suppose that is? Well, no one likes war, especially if you're focused on the economy, but there may be another reason. You see, all the Arab nations in the Gulf have something in common. They've all partnered up with the US for security. And all the petrodollars, no doubt. These partnerships have allowed the US to build bases all over the place and station thousands of troops in the region. As we speak, the Americans have more than 43,000 boots on the ground. And more soldiers are on the way. Where are they headed? Well, here's a map of the region. And these are the American military sites in the area. There are a lot, both permanent bases and makeshift sites. The smaller sites are all over the place, even in Arab nations which are sympathetic to Iran. Countries like Iraq and Syria. The Americans have bases there too. Then there are bases in Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Oman. As you can see, the US has troops practically everywhere. Troops, jets, drones, ships, you name it. It seems every Arab country has made some deal or the other with the Americans. The largest concentration of bases is in Kuwait. There are 5 bases there. And about 13,500 permanently deployed troops, mostly at Camp Arif Jan and the Ali Al Salem Air Base. Those were the numbers from 2021, before the latest conflict, so expect additional deployments right now. Now, Kuwait is at Iran's doorstep. That is why it makes sense for the Americans to boost their presence there. You also have other major US bases in Bahrain, Qatar, and the UAE. Again, these are long-term installations, making them ideal for an additional influx of troops. Another major base is in Djibouti in Africa, at the tip of the Red Sea, right across from Yemen, which is where the Iran-backed Houthi group is based, in Yemen. We told you that the Houthis plan to step up their attacks on global shipping. Well, the US is prepared. Not just with that base in Djibouti, but also additional naval deployments. The US already had ships in the Red Sea to deter the Houthis. Now it has sent 4 more, 4 guided missile destroyers to augment its presence. The Americans also have ships in the eastern Mediterranean Sea. This is near Israel's coast, which means near both Gaza and Lebanon. You may have heard the term gunboat diplomacy. It's when countries send both diplomats and warships to another nation, just in case negotiations fail. The US was famous for this back in the day, and it seems old habits die hard. The US currently has 3 guided missile destroyers and 1 amphibious assault ship in the Mediterranean, and they're sending one of their aircraft carriers as well. The USS Harry S. Truman is on its way to West Asia. It is traveling with a strike group. This means more destroyers, more carriers, and more frigates, all making their way to a volatile region. The Americans already have 1 aircraft carrier in the region. It's called the USS Abraham Lincoln. It's said to be operating in the Gulf of Oman, breathing down Iran's neck. So the second carrier will probably be deployed in another region. As you can see from the map, America has all of West Asia covered to make sure that nothing happens to Israel. But that's just the US. What about the rest? Well, no one compares to the Americans, but the UK is also ramping up its presence. Britain has bases in Cyprus, and it has deployed 700 additional troops there, joining the 500 they had deployed earlier this summer. The UK also has ships patrolling the eastern Mediterranean to fight the Houthis and to help with evacuations if it comes to that. Now, amid all of this, India has sent ships to the region as well, but for a very different reason. 3 Indian ships have docked at the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas: the INS Tir, INS Shardul, and ICGS Veera. These ships are in Iran for training exercises. The Indian ships arrived in Iran on Tuesday, hours after Iran fired missiles at Israel. Talk about awkward timing, but the Indian ships are there now, and they will go ahead with a scheduled training exercise, thus adding to the deployments in the region. So that's how things stand right now. As you can see, West Asia is a powder keg. The next strong move can set it off. Let's hope it doesn't come to that.
Not only the right, but the duty to fight evil.
Iranian military forces have reacted to the aggression of the Zionist regime.
This kind of ballistic missiles were never launched in the history of the world.
Reaction of Netanyahu itself shows exhale of the painful strike.
Are Iranian nuclear and oil installations on target?
They know what is feasible, what is not feasible.
Did the Iron Dome fail?
We were actually very successful. All these missiles have missed the target.
The Iron Dome failed to intercept most part of our missiles.
Do you see India as a potential mediator in this conflict?
India is playing a very important role in our region.
Wars are not just fought on the battlefield, they're fought over the airwaves too. I'm talking about the battle of narratives, and the recent face-off between Israel and Iran is no different. We've heard different versions from both sides. Israel claims that it was defeated. Such narratives often play out on different platforms, but we decided to merge it. Today we interviewed the Israeli ambassador to India and the Iranian ambassador to India. We spoke to them about the same issues and narratives, like did the Iron Dome fail? How will this war end? And what is India's role? The answers they gave tell you what the root issue is, a divergence in world view. The first question was about the recent missile attack. Did Israel poke Iran into attacking? And if so, what was Iran's main motive? Listen to what the ambassador said.
We are sorry that enough pressure wasn't put on the Iranian regime, because we sent messages, multiple messages, through many countries, including India.
To Iran?
To Iran.
Saying what?
Saying that they shouldn't attack Israel because the price will be dear. They are the only country in the world, I don't know if you know that it has sworn to destroy another country. That's completely unacceptable. And they are pursuing this path systematically. When we put in danger their path by removing their tentacles of this octopus from the region, then they decide to attack directly. That's their true face.
We are happy because Iran has reacted. Iranian people are happy because Iranian military forces have reacted to the aggression of the Zionist regime, assassination of Khamenei inside Iran, in the territory of Iran, and assassination of Secretary General of Hezbollah, who is a close and valuable friends of Iran and a military advisor of Iran in Lebanon.
A big question now is how will Israel respond? Some reports say it may target Iran's nuclear sites. I put this question to Israel's envoy. Understandably, he was reluctant to reveal much, but the Iranian envoy did answer. He warned of a much bigger escalation.
I'm not going to get into specifics. This is up to the Israeli government to decide. There are capabilities that we may have, we may not have. I'm not going to speculate about that. I don't have the information. At the end of the day, the government of Israel has the right information, and they know what is feasible, what is not feasible, and I'm not going to answer at this point instead of them because I don't know.
If it do anything against Iranian nuclear issue, no nuclear infrastructure or nuclear building, or Iranian oil industry, the reaction of Iran will be more painful for Israel. And as Supreme Leader promised and officially mentioned, the strike will be very, very strong.
What does that mean? Now to the cause of this escalation, the missile barrage on Tuesday. You may have seen the pictures of missiles thudding into the ground. Does that mean that Israel's air defenses failed? Did Iran really punch through the Iron Dome? Again, two very different answers from both the men.
We were actually very successful because, first of all, despite the fact that they fired that, the only tragic result was the killing of an innocent Palestinian in Jericho, a Palestinian from Gaza. And all these missiles have missed the target. They didn't damage any military installation, and they fell on open areas, on places that are completely, completely non-lethal, and they didn't hit the targets that they were intended to hit.
You can see the explosion of strikes in different parts of Israel, or we call it occupied territory of Israel. So I think the reaction of Netanyahu itself shows and proves the extent and excel of the painful strike. According to our assessment, the Iron Dome failed to intercept most part of our missiles.
Then came the most important question. How will this war end? Israel's ambassador spelled out three main objectives in Gaza, in Lebanon, and in Iran. He did not say how they would be achieved, but that's been Israel's style. Keep everyone guessing. The Iranian ambassador flipped our question, though. He predicted a very different end to the war.
First of all, we want our hostages back from Gaza, and we want to prevent Hamas from rearming and regrouping. We already have most of our residents in the south back in their homes. In the north, we want to bring safely our population back to their homes by removing the infrastructure that Hezbollah has prepared on the other side of the border to attack them in order for them to feel safe to go home. And we want to make sure that the Iranians will not launch attacks like that again in the future.
Netanyahu, it is better to reverse the question. Let's think about the regime change in Israel. Netanyahu has hijacked the people of Israel, hijacked the state of Israel, hijacked the whole region, hijacked United States by continuation of this war, So I hope that, and I believe that it is not too far, that this war will lead to the collapse of coalition in Israel.
Of course, to end the war, someone needs to mediate. And that summons been missing in West Asia. Last week, India's foreign minister suggested that New Delhi could help out. Israel welcomed that offer, but Iran's ambassador said something interesting. He said Tehran hasn't had many discussions on Gaza with India. Why? Listen in.
Pleased with the fact that India has a clear message when it comes to fighting terrorism. And we understand why many of our friends are concerned. We are actually following this very closely, and we are engaging, not only with them, but also with other international players and agencies to supply humanitarian assistance to the Gaza Strip, to make sure that people do not suffer hunger or medical difficulty. To the best of my knowledge, India hasn't been involved in offering specific ceasefire deal. I think that India is playing a very important role in our region. I think that what India is offering the region actually should be grabbed by the countries of the region, because India is a rising power. India is becoming one of the most important economies in the world. India has a lot of things to offer to our region in trade, in manufacturing, in commercialization, in innovation.
We did not have any discussion regarding the Gaza issue with India, frankly. And we hope that we could, we hope that we had such this dialogue, because India is an influential country in the world and has good and close relation with Israel and could use its influence. This is one point. Second point is
sorry, but why didn't you have the conversation if you think you should have had it?
We did not feel such this readiness. We just witnessed or heard some official position, official stance from high-ranking Indian authorities. Another issue that we believe that Hamas is not terrorist. Hamas is a resistance group.
Another possible mediator is China. They have been siding with Palestine. They've also brokered a peace deal between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority. So naturally, Israel's ambassador is not thrilled. But that's not the surprise. Despite being a partner, even Iran wasn't thrilled about China's role. Their ambassador says Beijing hasn't really presented a concrete peace plan.
They've been so far friendly to us. I think their approach on the international stage when it comes to the Palestinian question, another question, is wrong. And we've been telling them that. We have been criticizing their approach. We have this dialogue with them.
You know, China's priority is economy now. Still, China is rising and is advancing United States in different fields of technology and economy. China, until now, we did not witness any efficient or practical proposal from China regarding the tension regarding Gaza or Palestine or Israel. Besides this, China has good relation with Israel too.
So do you count it among your friends?
You know, friends are not, you know, friends and hostility, friendship and hostility is not something, it's a binary 0 and 1. It could be in some cases you are friend, in some cases you have different idea, in some cases you are competitors, in some cases you may stand against each other. So China generally is our friend, economically is our friend, politically is our friend, but Chinese policy toward Middle East is very complicated.
As war clouds loom large, what does life in West Asia look like? Short answer, millions are living in two different realities. In Israel, while Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu plans a retaliation, Israelis are celebrating the Jewish New Year and couples are getting married in bomb shelters. In Iran, pride has flooded the streets. Thousands are celebrating their country's bold move, while others are preempting grave consequences and queuing up for fuel. In Iraq, around 100 babies have been named Nasrallah in honor of the Hezbollah leader who was killed in Lebanon last week. Meanwhile, in Lebanon, a mass displacement crisis is underway, with around 1 million people rendered homeless within a week. Amid the constant reminders of war, West Asia grapples with love, hope, grief, and fear. Here's a report.
Israel is embroiled in a multi-front conflict, and its people are in a state of suspended animation, surrounded by reminders of war. But sometimes there's a glimmer of hope. Set against the breathtaking view of Jerusalem's old city, an Israeli man proposed to his partner. Their ceremony was interrupted by Iranian rockets flying across Israeli skies.
Above us there were sirens. The sky was red. We saw fire. It was one of the scariest things. But despite the terrorizing fear, we remained strong.
On the very same night, love scored another win in Jerusalem. Under the night sky of missiles, a couple got married. They slow danced in a cramped bomb shelter.
You know, you go with the flow. You don't let that affect your happiness. You don't let it affect, this most important moment of your life. You're like, okay, we adjust. So we will dance in the shelter. We will sign our ketubah in the shelter. We will continue with life. And
yeah, for me, no fear at all. We're in Israel. We know what's going on here, and it's just part of being here.
These are uncertain times for Israelis. As Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu plans a retaliation, the Jewish people mark their new year. It's called Rosh Hashanah. And this year it coincides with escalating tensions. But tens of thousands of Israelis have left their homeland and flocked to another war-torn country, Ukraine. They are in the city of Uman, about 200 kilometers south of Kyiv, on an annual pilgrimage.
It's beautiful here. Everyone should be here.
But coming to Ukraine, there is war going on here.
Who cares? There's a war in Israel. We have God. We have Hashem. That's all that matters.
Really? And
yeah.
How much really?
100%.
Last night it was a big missile attack on Israel. Did you speak to your relatives?
Everyone's good because we have God. That's it. There's nothing to worry about. Nothing.
But what do you think about Iran? And
we should take them out. They've been bothering us for way too long, and we got to get rid of them.
Which brings us to Iran. How are Iranians coping with mounting tensions? On the one hand, there's pride. Yesterday, Tehran's streets were flooded with crowds. They were celebrating Iran's boldest move yet in the conflict. Some carried the yellow flags of Hezbollah, an Iranian proxy, along with portraits of its slain chief, Hassan Nasrallah.
I'm very happy that we got our revenge. We should have done it sooner. Now the main element is Netanyahu. If we hit him and kill that rabid dog, then I'll be really glad.
We expected this to happen earlier so that Israel is put in its place.
But on the other hand, there's also fear. Some are worried about the consequences, afraid that the country is stumbling towards a full-blown war. So people are in preparation mode. And for some, that means queuing up to stock up on fuel, preempting future shortages. It's like living in two realities at the same time. And this isn't limited to Iran and Israel. In Iraq, 100 newborns have been named Nasrallah after the Hezbollah leader was killed in Lebanon last week. The country is still in shock. In the last week, around 1 million people have been displaced in Lebanon. More than 500 schools have been converted into shelters. Thousands of people are sleeping on the floors of classrooms. Thousands of others are sleeping in mosques, in the streets, and under bridges. Amid the war clouds and the saber rattling, millions of lives across West Asia remain on hold. The present-day scenario is a grim picture, but the future could be much worse.
With all this talk about West Asia, we sometimes forget that chaos can erupt anywhere. It's something that India knows well. After all, India neighbors Pakistan, South Asia's terrorist summer camp. Well, it seems the camp is in session and they've invited special external faculty in the form of Zakir Naik Naik is a televangelist who is wanted in India. He is wanted for money laundering and inciting hate between communities. While most countries think that that second part, inciting hate, is troubling, Pakistan seems to view it as bona fide credentials. The Pakistani government itself extended an invite to Naik, asking him to tour the country for a month and give sermons all across. Yesterday, Zakir Naik met Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif. Sharif lauded him for his work. And he even said that he had personally benefited from Zakir Naik's lectures. I don't know what's worse, the tone-deaf optics or the fact that Pakistan's Prime Minister is wasting time watching televangelists. But maybe that's not so surprising. After all, their real power lies with Pakistan's army. Perhaps they encourage their pocket politicians to watch TV and stay out of the way. But jokes aside, this isn't a great look. Zakir Naik is a wanted man. He's accused of inciting hatred and inspiring terrorists. A terror attack took place in Bangladesh in 2016. 22 people were killed at Dhaka's Holy Artisan Bakery. 5 people were arrested for the massacre, and at least one of them said that he was inspired by Zakir Naik, that he was a regular viewer of Naik's TV channel. It is called, and I'm not making this up, Peace TV. India swung into action after that attack. The channel was banned, so was Naik's foundation. It's called the Islamic Research Foundation. Investigations found that Zakir Naik was using both to launder money. Meanwhile, Bangladesh banned Naik as well. He's also banned in the UK, Sri Lanka and Canada. So it isn't just India that thinks that he's dangerous. And the most telling is the ban in Bangladesh, a Muslim-majority country, because they saw firsthand how dangerous Zakir Naik can be. He fled India in 2016 after his name came up in the Bangladesh terror case. He sought refuge in Malaysia, where he's been living since. But even Malaysia thinks that he's trouble. In 2019, Naik was banned from giving speeches in Malaysia. He was picked up by the police there for inciting racial tensions. He told Malaysians of Chinese descent to go back to China. He questioned the loyalty of Malaysian Indians, and this sparked outrage in the country, leading to the gag order. So he has inspired terrorists and incited racial tensions while preaching on a channel called Peace TV. And Naik doesn't just promote Islam there, he denigrates other religions and even different sects within Islam. There are worries about how this could impact Pakistan, which is already full of sectarian divides, and where minority sects like the Ahmadis are persecuted. Pakistan is already brimming with violence, and they want to add an incendiary preacher to this mix. Zakir Naik arrived in Pakistan on Monday, and he has already courted controversy. He insulted a charity that takes care of orphaned girls within 2 days of landing. This is the person that Pakistan's Prime Minister is praising. And these are the views that he's apparently benefiting from. Now, if Pakistan were a normal country, this may not have mattered very much. It would have just been a problem for the locals and maybe law enforcement. But Pakistan is a nuclear-powered, military-run state with a penchant for extremism. Add Naik to the mix, and it's not just India that should be worried. The whole world may come to regret Naik's whirlwind tour in Terror Central. The British Empire has witnessed yet another sunset, this time in the Chagos Islands. The UK is returning the islands to Mauritius. Chagos is a cluster of strategically important islands in the Indian Ocean. The largest among them is Diego Garcia. It became a military base for the UK and the US when Mauritius, a former British colony, was forced to give up the islands in exchange for their independence in 1968. Over the past few years, there has been mounting pressure on the UK to surrender from several nations, including India. In fact, sources say that India played a quiet but important role. And after more than half a century, the UK is finally handing over the sovereignty of these islands. Why does it matter? And what does the deal say? Here's a report.
The Chagos Islands. It's an archipelago of more than 60 islands in the Indian Ocean. This is a remote but strategically important cluster. After all, this was Britain's last African colony. We say was because after more than a century, the UK has finally agreed to hand over sovereignty of the Chagos Islands to Mauritius. This is a historic move. It comes after decades of mounting anger and years of fractious negotiations. Here is a quick flashback. Mauritius was a former British colony. It was illegally forced to give the Chagos Islands away in return for its own independence in 1968, and Chagos became the so-called British Indian Ocean Territory. Back then, the British negotiated a secret deal with the US. They agreed to lease Diego Garcia, the largest atoll of Chagos, which became a US-UK military base. The UK evicted about 1,500 residents. They were sent to Mauritius and the Seychelles. Britain later apologized for this move and promised to hand the islands to Mauritius when they were no longer needed for strategic use. But that day never came. The UK insisted that Mauritius had no legitimate claim to the islands. Standard colonial gaslighting. But in recent years, the UK has faced diplomatic isolation over their claim. Various UN bodies, including the Top Court and General Assembly, have sided with Mauritius, demanding that the UK surrender. Several nations, including India, have played their part as well. According to sources, India has played a quiet but important role. So finally, they have. Which brings us back to the deal. What does it say? First, it secures the future of Diego Garcia. This island has been central to the territory dispute. Even today, it's a key military base for the UK and the US. It houses Navy ships and long-range bomber aircraft. So the deal guarantees the operation of the base for the next 99 years. And second, it secures the future of the archipelago's people. Islanders who were displaced in the past 5 decades now have the right of return. India has called the outcome a win for all sides, as per sources. US President Joe Biden welcomed the deal. He says that it was a clear demonstration that through diplomacy and partnership, countries can overcome long-standing historical challenges to reach peaceful and mutually beneficial outcomes. But not everyone is happy. The UK's Conservative leaders have called this a weak and appalling move. No surprises there. But about half a century after the UK gave up control of most of its vast global empire, it has finally agreed to hand over the Chagos Islands. But this is one of many, including the Cayman Islands, Falkland Islands, and Gibraltar. Now, the other British overseas territories can only wait for the sun to set on the empire on their shore.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Japan, an American bomb from World War II explodes at an airport in parts of Chile and Argentina. People catch a glimpse of the solar eclipse. In the US, an artist creates a gigantic portrait of Kamala Harris in farmland ahead of presidential elections. And finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1932, Iraq gained independence from Britain after 12 years of colonial rule. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
From impeachments to inaugurations, if it's a political story, we are on the scene. The race for the White House is heating up.
Kamala, you're fired.
I say, bring it on.
If it's breaking news, we're live with the latest coverage. From the White House, the State Department, and Capitol Hill, we know the issues, but above all, we know the players to bring you the latest in-depth analysis on all the key stories that we're covering. I'm Eric Ham. Join me